The key fob flashed like a coin under the tree lights. My package was thin, the kind that sighs when you press the tape. "Don't embarrass us," my daughter breathed, and the room kept smiling. "Before we go on, tap subscribe so you don't miss the rest." I'm Diane Hart, 58, Miami. The MacArthur Causeway glows like a runway when the water is dark. The house smelled like cinnamon and clean glass, the kind of air you polish before guests arrive. Paper snowflakes trembled on the AC vent. A yacht ribboned in miniature sat under the fur, its paint so glossy it borrowed every light. The box in my lap was soft and creased at the corners. Everyone watched Franklin Cole, my son-in-law's father, turn the key fob in his palm like it was a small moon. It was Christmas Day, late morning. The napkins had gold edges. Someone had placed the camera on self-timer. Tara angled our bodies to frame the good side of the tree. Her laugh had the weight of an instruction. I smiled in the shape she'd planned and tried not to hear the word "Mom" like a club dropped on tile. "Second Wish," the model plaque read. The name was etched in a font that wanted you to clap. Evan stood behind Franklin, with his hand on the old man's shoulder. They looked like a statue called Legacy. My box had cartoon flamingos and scarves. I peeled the tape. The socks inside were pink and thin and cheerful. The tag said $12.99. The way Tara watched me said, "Please be easy." I said thank you. I folded the tissue slowly, keeping it square. It helps to have small tasks when your heart misbehaves. Someone poured Prosecco. Someone said, "It's perfect for him." And the word perfect did its heavy work. Franklin's smile was wide and loose, the way men smile when the room has been set like a table for them. He kissed Tara's cheek. She held his face for the picture and kept me on the edge of the frame. It was not the first time we'd confused generosity with theater. It was just the shiniest. The key fob winked. My socks whispered. I placed them back in the box as if they were breakable. Tara touched my wrist. "Mom," she murmured, lips barely moving, breath sugary. "Please don't make this a thing." Her tone was the velvet rope. It has been a rope for years. I turned the model yacht so the name faced me. Second Wish meant there had been a first. The stand rocked slightly. A corner of paper slipped from beneath the foam base. I pressed it back before anyone saw. The edge had a perforation like a bill. Paper never asks to be admired, it just waits. They started talking about christenings and champagne and Coastal White. Evan listed trim levels the way boys list baseball stats. Franklin nodded at words like thruster and teak. I tried to feel only happy for them, the way Tara needed me to feel. Somewhere in the kitchen a pan cooled with a small repeating tick. It matched my pulse the way worry loves rhythm. I carried my box to the hall table and gave the socks a place. The table had a bowl for keys and a jar of peppermint bark. Tara trailed me, still smiling for the air. "You like them?" she said, not a question. "Of course," I said, because I've learned that peace depends on the right answer. She tucked a loose hair behind my ear like I was a child who might misbehave. "Be easy," she whispered again, and then louder for the room. "Isn't this special?" The word special set like glue. We took the group photo, the camera balanced, on a stack of cookbooks. Tara angled us again. The tree filled the space that should have held my husband, and his absence made a seam the eye couldn't help tracing. No one said his name. Grief is a guest we sit far from the food. When the timer blinked, I reached for the model to keep it steady. The foam base lifted, just an inch. The paper slid free and kissed the wood. Marina letterhead. The kind of font that believes in rules. Biscayne Harbor Marina mooring invoice, due the 1st of the month. Amount, $2.400. A phone number underlined itself with authority. I slid it back under the foam and smoothed the ribbon. I did not say anything. Saying things is how people make you the problem. Evan unboxed a bottle of champagne with a sigh like a secret. "To family," he said, looking at the men. Franklin held up the key. Tara watched their faces the way directors watch actors. I stood beside the tree and counted breaths. The needles smelled of tin and sugar. The lights threw small circles on the floor, like coins on shallow water. I thought of my husband and his habit of folding receipts into perfect squares. He liked to say that numbers are only noisy when ignored. The first toast finished. The room broke into small conversations that sounded like linens rubbed between fingers. I drifted to the window. The bay was a smooth sheet, gray as a secret. On the side table, beneath the orphaned ribbon, the model's stand leaned again. I lifted the yacht with both hands and adjusted the base. The invoice edge winked. I smiled at it, the way you smile at a cat in a doorway. It didn't return the smile. Paper doesn't care. "Mom," Tara said, coming close enough for her perfume to settle. "Please, just be gracious." I said, I am trying." She tilted her head like a judge. "Don't embarrass us," she said, and her voice was soft and ironed together. "Embarrass us." I put the model down. Sometimes the smallest words open the largest rooms. Dinner moved like a show. The ham gleamed, the potatoes held their shape. The conversation skipped from coastal routes to who might be invited to the christening. I rinsed plates because my hands needed an honest job. Evan appeared at my shoulder. "Mom," he said, using the word he uses when he wants my compliance to taste like family. "We'll take Franklin out next weekend. You'll love it when we do a family sale." He kissed my temple and didn't wait for my answer. Men who win the stage rarely wait. At the sink, I could see the hall table. The sockbox sat patient. My husband would have laughed at the flamingos. He loved small absurdities. He also loved contracts and the way signatures act like doors. I dried my hands and pressed the towel into a perfect rectangle. There is dignity in even edges. I told Tara I was going to stretch my back. She nodded the way people nod at small, harmless animals. In the hallway, the quiet felt like a secret with its shoes off. I lifted the model again and slid the paper out. It came willingly, like it had been waiting for my hand. The invoice had 2 columns and a tone. It listed birth B17. It mentioned a late fee after 30 days. The phone number weighted in bold. I copied it to my mind the way you copy a melody. Franklin laughed from the other room, full and sure. The sound carried like a flag. I tucked the invoice back as if I were tucking in a child. I set the model straight. I returned to the kitchen, cheerful. I can be cheerful on command. It is an old, heavy skill. Tara searched my face as if it might leak. "You're okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. The word fine is a hallway with many doors. She chose the one that kept the party pretty. We moved to coffee. The cups clinked like small bells. I put 2 sugars in mine, because sweetness is something you can count. The talk turned to hashtags and where to stand for sunset photos on the dock. I watched Franklin's hands as he pantomimed steering. I watched Tara's eyes as they watched the others watching her. Watching can be a kind of prayer if you do it long enough. When the gifts were gathered, the men started their ritual of planning. Budgets were surely for other people. Plans were for them. Tara floated on it like a swan on hotel water. I took my socks and the ribbon and the small card that said, "Love you, Mom." The handwriting was neat as a contract. I told them thank you again. I meant it. I always mean it when I say it, even when it costs me. On the drive home, the road hummed under the tires. The dashboard glow lit my hands. The city sat on the water like jewelry that doesn't belong to me. The bridge rose and fell with the steadiness of a chest breathing. I thought about my husband's habit again, how he folded receipts into squares and lined them up in a drawer, how he would slide one out and say, "Truth is boring on purpose." The invoice number beat quietly in my head. Boring is a weapon if you hold it long enough. I set the socks on my counter and let the box breathe. The quiet of my apartment felt earned. I boiled water for tea. The kettle began that soft pre-whistle sound. I took out an old shoebox where I keep papers no one cares about until they do. The lid still smelled faintly of leather and dust. I lined the inside with a fresh envelope. I wrote one word on it, harbor. Sometimes naming something builds a path to it. I poured my tea and watched the steam rise like a promise. I thought about the way Tara's fingers rested on Franklin's sleeve, not loving, but confirming. I thought about the key fob ticking in his pocket like a small metronome for entitlement. I thought about the model yacht's foam base and the way the paper reached for me without moving. I let my mind walk calm circles, the way you walk the perimeter of a yard before you plant. When the tea cooled, I opened my phone and typed the marina's name into the search bar. I did not press call, not yet. It is good to let the shape of a thing settle before you touch it. Numbers have heat when you get close, and I didn't want to fog the glass. I closed the phone and set it face down. The apartment ticked. A distant siren drew a thin line across the night. I washed my cup and wiped the counter and smoothed the towel over the oven handle. Order makes a sound. It sounds like breathing you can trust. I placed the socks in the top drawer. They were soft and ridiculous and warm. Their cheerfulness felt like an insult and a rescue at once. I let them be both. Then I opened the drawer again and laid the box top to the side. Small things should catch light when you open the door. In bed, the ceiling fan wrote circles in the air. I closed my eyes and pictured the causeway at night. Headlights drafting over water, the bay holding its breath. The border between shine and rule is thinner than people think. People like Tara think rules are stagehands. People like me keep the scripts. There is a difference. Morning would come, with its errands and its texts and its usual performance. But the invoice number had already set its stool in the corner. It would wait quietly. It would keep time. I slept like a ledger that knows the next line will balance. The next day, I folded the Christmas tablecloth because my hands like honest jobs. I gathered the stray bits of ribbon in a bowl and threw away the boxes that smelled like pretending. The socks stayed. They kept their place, a small bright flag in a calm drawer. On my counter, the envelope marked harbor lay flat and patient, like a pond that will hold a reflection when you are ready to look. Numbers don't flinch. Paper doesn't blush. Smiles can be rehearsed, and most are. I know what can be bought, and I know what must be signed. I also know that embarrassing people is not my hobby. It is sometimes the side effect of truth arriving with its shoes tied. The phone number in my head waited like a green light at a quiet intersection. I took one slow breath and let it pass. Not today. Not because I was afraid, but because timing is a tool. They had given a yacht on a holiday. They had given me socks with birds. They had given me the one thing they didn't mean to give. Proof that shine costs money even when the camera is on. I put the envelope in the shoebox and slid the box to the back of the closet. I straightened the hangers. I closed the door with care. The latch made its honest click. Some plans begin with shouting. Mine began with a ribbon and a bill and a sentence that felt like a leash. Don't embarrass us. I won't, I thought, because I don't have to. Some things embarrass themselves when the lights are real. The bay smelled like battery rain and salt. I drove the causeway with the window cracked, letting it in. Miami slid by, all polish and glass, the kind of shine that forgets bills. The marina signs stacked like instructions you ignore until they bark. The guard waved me through when I said I was visiting family. Family is a password and a fog. It opens gates and blurs edges. Biscayne Harbor Marina breathed diesel and sunscreen. Masts pinged like small clocks. I walked the dock slowly, counting slips. Counting makes nerves behave. B-17 sat halfway down, where pelicans pretend to be gargoyles. The azimuth gleamed like a promise kept to the wrong person. Second wish floated in cursive, too pretty to hold weight. I checked the stern for the hull number and memorized it. The dockmaster's office had a fan that stuttered at each turn. Rules were taped behind glass in font that trusted itself. Mooring fees due on the 1st. 30 days triggers lien rights. There it was, plain as bread, the sentence people never read. I asked about a berth, voice light, like I might dream. He flipped a ledger the old way, finger tracing, lips tight. B-17's behind, he said, not looking up from the column. 2 months. Notice is sent. Next step is paperwork nobody enjoys. He meant nobody who owned the shine. I enjoyed paper. I thanked him and bought a neon visitor tag with cash. Outside, gulls argued over a wrapper like it was jewelry. A crewman in a faded cap hauled boxes up the gangway. He moved like a man who stops counting hours when insulted. I offered a hand in a silence that invited sentence fragments. He gave me both. Crew's waiting on 18, he said softly. He meant 1,000, wages that should have been simple and on time. I listened without interrupting, taking the weight into my chest. He shrugged like people do when pride and need share one chair. I told him I kept books at a clinic and no forms. His eyes measured me, found no threat, found a mother's steadiness. I can send invoices, he said, almost like a question. I gave him my number and watched him save it carefully. Text PDFs, I said. Keep originals safe. Don't chase. Let paper walk. He nodded. He knew the feel of a net dropped calmly. On my way back, I photographed the posted rules through the glass. Reflections of rigging tangled the words like vines around truth. I took a second photo until the letters stood clean. Power prefers to be legible to the one who shows up. At home, the sock sat bright and patient on the counter. I made a sandwich and chewed slowly, giving myself plain fuel. The voicemail light blinked. Tara's voice waited, sugar with an edge. I let it blink. Peace sometimes means not picking up the rope. The first text arrived, before the plate was clean. A screenshot of an invoice, then another, then the totals. 18,000 across 3 crew, weeks clocked, signatures straight. I labeled the thread crew B17 and archived the attachments carefully. My husband used to say, receipts are a language of mercy. He meant they rescue memory from mood and make things square. I opened my shoebox, turned a new envelope, and wrote crew. The sound of pen on paper steadied the apartment like music. Later, Tara messaged a dinner invite wrapped as a summons. Family meeting, quote, hearts and a yacht emoji like confetti. Her house smelled like new tile and candles that perform wealth. She hugged me in a hallway, eyes asking if I'd behave. The dining table had chargers like medals and chairs that judged posture. Evan tapped a laptop and talked about consolidating family funds. He said the word optimize like it deserved a standing ovation. Franklin nodded as if numbers were polite men in pressed suits. They spoke about efficiency and one signature and simplifying. They did not say which drawer held which key or why. I asked one soft question about the grandkids' education accounts. Evan breezed past it, said those were temporarily in motion. I let the word motion sit on the table and cool. He clicked to a slide with photos of teak and chrome. He praised the marina, then mispronounced its name like it mattered less. I sipped water and watched Tara watching their admiration like oxygen. In the kitchen afterward, dishes gave my hands an honest rhythm. The printer in the study hummed and spat a single page. I passed by and saw a draft with boxes half filled. Gift tax return. Form 709 sat at the top like a dare. Not filed, not signed, not dated. I didn't touch the paper. I read the way you read a sign, with your whole body. Lines for donor and dunny, valuations, appraisals, words that carry weight. I folded the sight into memory and walked back to the sink. Tara joined me with a smile that asked for complicity. She said I could trust Evan. He handles these things smoothly. I nodded the nod that women use instead of starting wars. Her hand skimmed my forearm, soft, rehearsed, like checking for static. The meeting ended with plans for a christening party and hashtags. They talked about drone shots and champagne that photographs correctly. No one asked about invoices that do not flatter in the sun. I left with a hug that tried to file me under compliant. At home, the apartment received me without questions. I laid the day down on my counter like a chart. Crew invoices here, marina rules here, my pulse somewhere steady. I brewed tea and let the steam draw a boundary I could keep. The next morning, I called the marina with a voice like weather. Not bright, not apologetic, just the temperature the day already had. I asked for a copy of the rulebook and a statement. They agreed if I came in with identification and a purpose. I put on flats that make no sound and drive wherever. The causeway grew out of the water like a calm decision. In the office, the dockmaster recognized me and didn't waste words. He printed the mooring ledger and stapled it with old precision. 2 months late, notices sent, late fees accruing like barnacles. He slid the rulebook across the counter with the lien clause marked. The highlight line was the color of lemons and warning flags. I thanked him and asked the cost to settle arrears at once. He frowned the way men frown when someone follows the rules. He quoted the figure, tapped the calculator, added the late fees. The number fit into my head and found a chair. I didn't pay then. Timing is not a dessert, it's salt. Outside, a breeze lifted scraps of ribbon from a trash bin. A pelican splashed, then stilled, eyes flat, as if counting us. I photographed the whole number clean, once with my hand for scale. Proof likes company. A hand makes numbers look less like fog. The crewman texted again, with PDFs named cleanly and stamped. He apologized for bothering me. People apologize for hunger too often. I told him he wasn't bothering me and thanked him again. He replied with a single anchor emoji, shy and deliberate. On the way back, my tires sang against the bridge seams. I thought of my husband's habit at marina offices years ago. He would chat with clerks like equals because they are. He would read the laminated rules with reverence, not resentment. Micro-flashback, him folding a brochure into quarters with neat care. Boats are just houses that owe the water rent, he said once. He smiled after, to see if the joke softened the truth. I laughed then. Now I understood the rent better than laughter. That evening, Tara called with a voice coated in sparkle. She asked if I'd seen the christening invitation in our chat. I said yes and kept my tone uninteresting as toast. She asked if I was happy for Franklin. I said of course. She waited for me to add more, to bless the theater. I didn't. Stillness unnerves people who rehearse applause. She filled the silence with details about a white dress code. She mentioned seating and photo angles and keeping children's fingers off railings. I pictured small fingers on teak, salt drying into lace patterns. I said I'd wear something quiet and arrive on time. She exhaled like a small storm had passed without rain. Before she hung up, she dropped the line like a pin. Don't be difficult, she said. Not a plea, a warning covered in satin. When she was little, difficult meant any time I said no. No has always been expensive in our house. Tonight I gave it a payment plan. The week stretched, calm on top, pulsing underneath the floorboards. I worked at the clinic, balanced ledgers, answered soft questions kindly. Between patients, I scanned crew invoices and filed them properly. At lunch, I researched lean assignments without falling into jargon holes. Words like, quote, assignment, perfection, notice kept their hats on. I respected them, didn't parade them, and wrote only what mattered. I drafted a list in pencil because pencil forgives ambition's edits. Pay arrears. Secure assignment. Collect crew claims. File notice. Calendar enforcement. Breathe. I ate alone that night, a bowl of rice and lemon. The socks were still on the counter, cheerful as overeager guests. I moved them to the drawer, lined like a runway for small things. They slid in smoothly, bright, ridiculous, exactly where they should be. Another text came from the crewman, this time an updated total. He'd spoken to a mate who surprised himself by trusting me. They were tired of asking nicely into the wind. I told him I heard him. People deserve to be heard properly. Later, Evan sent a group message with instructions about the party. He requested no phones during the blessing, as if reverent. He meant he wanted the blessing filmed from better angles later. He added a note about private security, like applause with a badge. I took a deep breath and exhaled slow enough to count. Control loves staging. Truth likes daylight at strange angles. I pressed my hand flat on the envelope labeled Harbor. Under it, the rulebook page glowed with the patience of stone. A day slid by, then another. The apartment softened. I kept living inside small, honest tasks that hold shape. I ironed a blouse because straight seams can be a prayer. I polished my flats because quiet shoes walk powerful rooms. When Tara visited, she brought macarons the color of pastels. She stood in my doorway like a person who owns the hall. I made tea and didn't rise to the occasion of performance. We sat, and she filled the air with scheduling and optics. I asked, softly, about the education accounts again. She blinked like a flash misfired. She said everything was fine. Fine is an accountant's word when someone else is listening. She counted sugars into her cup and spoke about florists. Before she left, she touched the socks peeking from the drawer. They're cute, she said, with that undertone that grades women. I said they were warm and placed one on my palm. Warmth is a quality not measured by cameras or followers. After the door closed, I allowed myself one honest minute. Not rage, not pity, just the weight of the choices ahead. The marina ledger lay open to the line that mattered. 30 days. I felt each number land like boots on a dock. I drove back once more and stood at the end of B-17. Evening painted the water the color of graphite notebooks. A new crewman scrubbed railings in circles that never finished. He sang under his breath a tune about women and weather. "Beautiful boat," I said, neutral as cloud cover. He nodded, eyes on the rail, mouth a line against patience. He mentioned a fuel bill that hadn't been handled yet. I stored the word fuel with the others, a quiet stack. Inside the office, the dockmaster asked if I'd decided. I said I would return soon with exactly what was needed. He didn't press. Men who work with water understand tides. We nodded at each other, two people fluent in boring truth. On the drive home, the sky smeared pink where the causeway dips. The dashboard clock ticked the same pace as my breath. I pictured a calendar with a day circled in pencil, not ink. Pencil keeps you honest about what can still go wrong. At the clinic next day, a patient left a newspaper behind. A story blurred at the bottom about maritime auctions. It was there, in print, the process people call unfortunate. Unfortunate always means someone ignored a rule that looked small. I clipped the story and tucked it behind the harbor envelope. Not as a threat, as a reminder that paper speaks plainly. I called a lawyer I trusted to love procedure more than talk. We discussed assignments, notices, and how not to wake obvious dragons. He listened without mansplaining and told me what to file where. He spoke in verbs, not myths, and sent a draft by afternoon. I read it twice, out loud, until the syllables sat correctly. Documents shouldn't wobble in the mouth. That's how errors hide. The precise time marker arrived like a postmark I could use. First week of January. That's how the ledger named the arrears. I wrote it in my notebook once, then drew a small box. Inside the box I wrote, simply, soon. By evening, I had copies labeled and a plan folded clean. I ate soup and let the spoon knock the bowl lightly. Shine makes noise, rules do too if you listen correctly. I set out my flats. Quiet shoes, steady floor, unmoved tide. Before sleep, I pictured Tara's face when the room changes. Not from cruelty, from gravity finally collecting what's owed. I thought of Franklin's loose, easy smile wobbling into attention. Attention is the only tax some men ever pay willingly. The night held. The city hummed like a machine that forgets. I did not forget. Paper does not forget. People eventually do. I turned off the lamp and let the plan breathe in the dark. Morning would bring signatures. Signatures bring weather you can measure. Somewhere on the bay, masts tapped time against a quiet sky. B-17 rocked and waited like a sentence missing a verb. I was ready to supply it, with ink, with kindness, with rules. Power hides in the line where you stop asking and start filing. I didn't find the betrayal in a shout. It arrived in a PDF that thought it was harmless. A monthly statement, the kind that emails itself at dawn. The subject line carried the grandkids' names like a banner. Inside, a transfer note sat neat and unblinking. $95,000 moved temporarily from education to Coal Coastal LLC. Temporarily is a word that likes no return dates. I sat very still and let the numbers settle. Calm is not forgiveness. It is a tool belt. I printed the page and slid it into harbor. Receipts rescue memory from charm. They always have. The shine had borrowed from children. That was the hinge. I called the lawyer with a voice that didn't wobble. We spoke in verbs, assign, notice, post, calendar, enforce. He sent the draft assignment with spaces that wanted ink. At your pace, he said. He meant right on time. I read every line until the air felt level again. At the marina, the dockmaster recognized my steadiness first. I requested a ledger, then payment, then the lien assignment. He watched my hands as if steadiness could be contagious. We totaled arrears and late fees without ceremony or story. I slid the cashier's check across. Paper met paper like flint. He stamped, received. Stamps like that sound like doors clicking. He countersigned the assignment of Marina Leanne with calm care. A carbon copy tucked itself behind the original like a shadow. He handed me a rulebook copy, folded to the clause. 30 days, he said, and then didn't need to say more. The crewman met me at B-17 with squared shoulders. He brought printed invoices, each signed, each dated, witnessed. We added affidavits of ours. We did not apologize. He kept thanking me. I kept saying, "FIL keeps you safe." He nodded like a man hearing water after a long road. Back home, I assembled the packet on a quiet table. Assignment? Crew wage claims, hull photo, ledger excerpt, notice draft. I checked the LLC on the registration, Cole Coastal LLC. Names are useful when you send certified letters that arrive. The envelopes weighted with stamps like polite, patient soldiers. I posted the public notice of intent to enforce lien. One at the Marina board, one mailed to the owner of record. One to myself, because paper likes witnesses who never forget. The lawyer filed what needed filing, where it had to land. Calendar entries appeared on my phone like small, faithful lighthouses. I chose the hour with care, not cruelty. Saturday, 4 p.m., the christening, by their own invitation. Not for spectacle, for proof meeting audience without disguise. Not a surprise. A schedule with a horn and a clipboard. Timing isn't theater. Timing is a lever that moves weight. The week inhaled and exhaled like tide under moon. I worked. I ate simple food. I slept like receipts. I wrote one more list and taped it inside the lid. Bring packet. Wear flats. Speak calmly. Let documents do talking. Do not argue with performance. Present the rules and wait. They dress the doc the way people dress doubt for photos. White lanterns. White flowers. White dress code like a hush. Franklin glowed. Evan curated. Tara moved guests like chess. Security stood where sympathy should have learned to stand. The key fob flashed in Franklin's palm, a small, bright crown. I stood at the edge, shoes quiet, packet steady. The water lapped the pilings in a rhythm older than money. Children pressed fingers to teak, mothers tugged them back gently. Someone rehearsed the blessing under breath, testing solemnity's tone. My phone calendar chimed once, then I silenced everything but law. They asked for no phones during the moment, and smiles aligned. A toast rose up like a sail catching easy wind. Laughter gathered, cameras tilted, Tara counted beats with her eyes. Then the towboat's horn drew one straight line through the scene. Every head turned before any face remembered how to arrange. The dockmaster walked first, clipboard, copy of the notice. Behind him, the officer whose badge loves rules, not shows. Beside them, the lawyer whose voice has no appetite for volume. I stepped forward only far enough to be seen, not centered. The water held the hush like glass holds breath. Cole Coastal LLC, the officer asked, steady as tide. No one answered fast. Shine hates paperwork that knows names. He addressed Franklin next, then Evan, then whoever owned privacy. The vessel is subject to a perfected maritime lien, he said. Plain words, level, no flourish. They land where pride cannot. Evan started talking with his hands, which prefer applause. He said delay, he said misunderstanding, he said later, he said wait. He tried to charm the words out of their uniforms. Charm lost interest faster than he could reload a smile. Paper doesn't blush, paper doesn't drink, paper doesn't network. Franklin lifted the key fob like a talisman against math. He looked at Tara for the script. Scripts fled when rules arrive. His lips formed. On what authority? The way men expect doors. On the one you agreed to when you birthed at B-17, I said. One line. No heat. Enough air for the room to hear it. The towel line kissed the stern with quiet certainty. Not a yank. A reminder that cause meets effect, eventually. Guests started stepping back, heels unsure on honest planks. One child asked if the boat was going to jail. A mother said shh and learned where shh stops working. The clipboard traveled like a small moon with its own gravity. Sign here to acknowledge notice. Not permission. Acknowledgement only. Evan refused with his chin. Franklin refused with his posture. The officer noted refusal in the space where facts live. Refusal is loud ink to people who keep ledgers. I handed Tara a sealed envelope without touching her wrist. Inside, the education statement and a simple, handwritten line. Return the children's money. Put it back before Monday. No lecture, no threat. Just a future that wants to square. She didn't open it. The paper opened her face instead. The lawyer placed the packet upon a deck box for air. Assignment of Marina lien. Crew wage claims with totals. Public notices mailed and posted. Intent to auction if unpaid. A chain of nouns. The kind that doesn't need adjectives. Even the flowers understood, falling quiet in their vases. Security hovered, then decided not to invent a role. They know the boundary where uniforms respect other uniforms. A few guests whispered about misunderstandings and fixing it Monday. Monday had already received its instructions in certified mail. Rules were not new, attention was. The crewman watched from a measured distance, hat in hand. I met his eyes once and gave a small nod. He didn't smile. Relief isn't a smile, it's oxygen. He breathed in and looked at the water like a witness. The dockmaster signed the final line with a practiced wrist. Evan tried a joke about content and too real for Instagram. It fluttered down between us and died of no oxygen. He turned to Tara for rescue. She had no rope left. She had only a sealed envelope growing heavier by the minute. Silence will do that when facts arrive with their shoes tied. The towboat's engine muttered, then steadied to a working hum. The line drew true. The bow turned like a face learning truth. Guests shifted again, deciding which corner offered the least honesty. A cork popped somewhere late and wrong, then sat embarrassed. Even the bubbles seemed to think better of celebrating. "Is this necessary?" Franklin asked the officer, finally small. Necessary is a word that feeds on earlier decisions. The officer answered with the clause and the dates and amounts. He didn't add tone. Tone is for parties, not paper. Franklin lowered the key fob until it mattered like plastic. I didn't gloat. Gloating makes noise that weakens clean lines. I simply held the edges of the moment so it wouldn't tear. The lawyer mentioned the scholarship account in my husband's name. Proceeds pledged to Sailing Futures, the Daniel Hart Fund. A public note had already been filed where notes belong. A murmur moved through the guests like wind through programs. Not pity, the other thing. Recognition that shine owes rent. Someone asked if there would still be a blessing. Blessings work finer when owed money returns to children. Maybe bless that, I thought, and kept it where thoughts stay. The vessel eased out, obedient to the physics of consequence. Water closed behind it with a sound like a ledger's line. Cameras rose without permission, then hesitated at the officer's gaze. He didn't forbid, he didn't need to. The scene forbade. Phones slid down. Adults learned the weight of documented verbs. Tara finally opened the envelope with hands that weren't practiced. She read to the period. Her throat lifted, then settled. She did not look at me first. She looked at her children. Then she looked at Evan as if he were a ledger. Some people are. They only look like husbands under lights. I turned to the crewman and said, softly, "Check your messages." 3 words. A bridge between waiting and what's due. His phone buzzed with a confirmation number and a time. He swallowed like the body does when air arrives deep. He tipped his cap to no one and to everything. The dock flowers sagged. The lanterns learned new stillness. Evan's jaw worked. Franklin's posture practiced not being seen. Tara folded the statement twice, then once, then flat again. I recognized the motion. My husband taught me that fold. It's what you do when you understand what must return. The officer read the last line, the one about auction. Not threat, schedule. A day already circled in a county file. He thanked the dockmaster for cooperation, the way professionals do. Then he nodded to me like people nod to sturdy things. It wasn't deference. It was the courtesy given to gravity. Guests drifted. Laughter tried to restart. It coughed and failed. Security looked relieved to be guards again, not decorators. The sea kept being the sea. It always collects unpaid rent. I held my packet and let the dock relearn its balance. Shine had met paper and remembered who writes outcomes. On the walk back, the board spoke under each step. My flats made the sound I trust, almost none. The sun angled low, turning the water the color of invoices. The yacht moved toward due process with the dignity of engines. Behind me, voices tried to choose a story they could swallow. I didn't offer them one. I had already written mine. It fit in envelopes and stamps and a horn at 4. It honored crews and children and rules people sign, unread. It fit my hands without asking me to perform. It ended here only long enough to begin consequences. I drove the causeway slow, windows down just a little. The air tasted of salt and a day that stood up. The dashboard glow held steady, no brighter than needed. I thought of my husband, who liked boring truth best. He would have smiled at the horn arriving on time. The calendar still showed dates that wanted attention tomorrow. Assignments create echoes. Echoes become steps. Steps reshape rooms. I let the thought cross like a gull between lanes. Then I let it pass so the night could clear. Some reversals don't require volume. They require receipts and tide. By nightfall, the dock remembered how to be a dock. Water took back its rhythm. People took back their faces. The horn's echo eased out over the bay like math. At home, I set the packet on my table. I made soup. I let the spoon count breaths. Quiet felt like a room that trusts its own door. The crewman's text arrived first. Received. Processing today. Thank you. Not emojis, real words. Air returning to tired lungs. I exhaled with him, miles apart, same tide, same clock. A second message chimed. Tara, no. Flourish, no sugar. The children's money is back, she added a screenshot. Proof glowed on my phone like a light you earn. Another chime. The lawyer, brief as a good hinge. Auction notice perfected. Scholarship pledge filed, no adjectives, only nouns. I pictured my husband's name printed where noise can't rewrite it. Evan didn't call. Silence is an admission when you're loud. His group chat went dim like a party after power. On Monday, the clinic day began with steady rain. I stopped at a blue mailbox and slid in an envelope. Not revenge, compliance. A quiet packet to a quiet office. The government likes receipts more than it likes stories. At work, I balanced ledgers, same way as always. Numbers lined up like chairs before a meeting. No chairs were missing. Nobody raised their voice to paper. That afternoon, Tara asked if she could bring the kids. Her tone wore flats, not heels. It sounded almost human. I said yes. With times, not maybe. With rules, not moods. We ate grilled cheese at my little table that night. Crumbs on plates. Stickers on tiny shirts. Honest evidence. Their laughter pinged like masts, small clocks that heal rooms. Tara lingered in the hall with the envelope again. She didn't pretend it was nothing. She didn't perform. Mom, she said, soft, like speaking into clean glass. I'm fixing things. Not an apology. Not theater. Start enough. I nodded. Mercy isn't forgetting. It's choosing a different lever. Boundaries slide into place like drawers done right. I told her the new terms. Calm, simple, durable. No more family meetings about my life without me. The education fund stays where education happens. Photos don't buy respect. Neither do parties at peers. She agreed without bargaining, which is new math for her. She kissed the kids, then left without arranging the air. The door clicked, honest as a stamp. Silence stayed kind. The socks waited in my drawer, pink birds still ridiculous. I wore them the next morning under jeans and sensible shoes. Warmth, where no one can grade it, is its own joke. I drove to the marina once more, not to watch. To leave flowers at the scholarship notice, small and plain. On the board, my husband's name sat patient beside futures. The dockmaster nodded. The crewman tipped his cap. We didn't make a moment. We kept a promise. Engines in the distance hummed their working music. The auction day came, then went, tidy as a ledger. Proceeds flowed where they should, through pipes with valves. A child I don't know will one day learn to tack. At home, I opened the shoebox and sorted the remains. Harbor, crew, assignment, notice. Each envelope lighter. I kept copies because the past likes to ask for proof. Franklin sent a card with handwriting that respected its line. Not guilt. Gratitude, a sentence that fit the size of truth. He returned the key fob to a drawer that finally clicked. Evan stepped down from managing anything with a child's name. He learned the sound a boundary makes when it locks. Tara started saying, please, to the right places. On a slow Sunday, rain braided itself into the bay. I drove the causeway at the speed of my breath. Wipers off, windows cracked, salt threading the air like needlework. The city lit up the water in squares and lanes. The green light held a beat longer at the island turn. I didn't chase it. I let it invite me through. I thought about how power pretends to be noise, how rules are quiet on purpose so they can last, how love, when it grows up, pays what it owes. I don't need the story louder, I need it true. I don't need an audience, I need a ledger squared. I don't need revenge, I need children's names untouched. The socks inside my boots kept their warm, silly secret. The road unspooled like ribbon without anyone staging it. Some gifts glitter. Better ones govern. Best ones return. If this quiet justice moved you, ride with me again. Like, comment, and share so more people hear what happens when receipts meet tide.